What's going on, guys? Welcome back to a new video and a new build. So as you can see, we're sort of building a bit of a hot rod this time around. Pretty excited about this thing. It's actually been coming along for a few weeks now. I have been steadily filming, but I really wanted to wait until you could sort of see the project take some sort of shape before I went releasing the content. Thought it'd probably be pretty hard to watch content of us getting stuff ready for this project without actually being able to visualize what it's going to be or what we're working towards. So without further ado, here is somewhat of the project taking shape, what we're trying to do here. So I've got plenty of footage now to show you in retrospect to go back and show you how we got to here. So before we go back there, what you can see here is a 47 Chev truck body cab on a HQ 1-tonner chassis. In the back end, we've got a Borg Warner 78, which you'll see how we actually got that in there. And for a driveline, we're actually using a 6-litre LS, and at this stage, a 6-speed manual conversion, which came out of a wreck, which you will also see. So let's get into it. I'll show you how we got here. So first things first, guys, the owner actually dropped us a wreck. This was a VE Series 1 SS manual ute that was actually crashed pretty locally. He managed to get it off the guy who crashed it for a really good price, considering the current market. So we went straight to work on pulling it out of the wreck and getting it ready for going into this hot rod. The wreck had been smashed in the front, but we were able to just chuck a battery in and actually get it running. So we did hear the engine running. It does run, it is healthy, seems to be fine. So it's moderately low Ks, the wreck. You did get it, yeah, really well priced for what it was. So out it comes. Given that we are working to budgets in stages on this project, we've decided to leave this 6-litre completely stock as it is. From running it, we believe that it is just dead stock, but it's healthy enough. The owner doesn't really want to spend the money to cam it at this point, maybe later on after the hot rod is built, but for now he really just wants to get this thing together and built and running and on the road. So we started by splitting the gearbox and getting the engine ready to go in the car. To do that, we had to change over the sump. We had bought a conversion sump from Performance Wholesale. This is a really painful job to do while it's hanging on a crane, but we really didn't want to have to pull the clutch and flywheel and stuff off to put it on a stand. So I sort of just persisted on the crane. If you're wondering why I'm wearing earmuffs, it's because Rex is tuning at the same time as I'm doing this. Super busy at the moment. Can't really afford the time or the downtime for the whole workshop to be on a standstill while tuning's happening. So unfortunately, just got to try and work around it. But just protecting my ears while Rex is tuning another car while I swap this sump over. So the sump we use in this instance is actually the exact same sump that we put on the LS in the yellow 1-tonner shop ute that we built. It is called a GM muscle car conversion sump. You can buy these from Performance Wholesale. They're really well priced. All it is literally just a rear hump sump from an LS, like just a stock LS that would come in a truck in the States or a van or something like that. So just a stock LS rear hump sump. It fits really well in the H series chassis. It also fits quite a number of other vehicles, so definitely worth looking into if you're trying to do a conversion. Very much a cheap way to go if it works for you. So on it goes, comes with a new windage tray to suit, new pickup obviously, and all new hardware to suit the new pickup and sump as well, so that's really handy. So we give the windage tray a nice big clean up and install that. Always make sure we clean out the pickup before it goes on. We never trust that these pickups are clean out of the box. You never know what could be in there, swarf, dirt, whatever. Who knows how long it's been in the box. So give it a good clean out. Bit of rubber grease in the O-ring to ensure it doesn't pinch, and obviously some Loctite on the pickup bolt, as always. And then we continue on with the sump. I should add that this day that I was doing this, it was about 1 billion degrees in the shed. It absolutely sucked. It's just a crappy job to try and do while the engine's swinging on a crane. It was freaking hot. It was loud. Rex was tuning. It just sucked ass. But anyway, it's all part of the gig. It's all part of the job. So we just use a little bit of ultra black, as always, just a little bit on the joins of the front and rear covers where they do have a tendency to leak. These are what we call steel-backed rubber gaskets. They seal really well. You do not need to silicone the gasket entirely, particularly if it's a new one. So just a little bit of silicone on the joins there and we're good to go. Alright, so once we had that engine ready, the owner had finally located himself a HQ 1-tonner chassis which he dropped to us. As you can see, we actually set this up in the middle bay of the shed and we actually moved the dyno to make room for it. We have been just that busy lately. We're going to have to start doing this pretty much every week to try and get a bit more done. So this is the diff that we were given to put in the chassis. So we chose to go for a Borg Warner 78 for this particular project. The owner has no plans to go down the forced induction route or anything with this hot rod. You know, the most it's ever going to be is a cammed up aspirated V8. So we figure a Borgie 78 is going to be plenty strong enough for the power that this thing's going to make. It's also a really, really good width, and having that Commodore stud pattern is actually a really good help. So you pair this disc braked diff with a Commodore stud pattern with some conversion hubs for the front to be able to run VT brakes. You end up with Commodore stud pattern at all four corners and a really, really good brake system for such a hot rod that's not going to cost an arm and a leg, and also really easy to get parts for. So it's the exact same setup that we plan on putting in the yellow shop ute as well. If you've watched the build, you'll know that that thing is turboed. We still reckon one of these diffs is going to be okay in that instance. So this actually came out of a VS Commodore that the owner located and bought and pulled out himself, which was really, really handy. So we went to work on cleaning up the diff, fabricating up the correct spring hangers and everything else to actually get it in the HQ chassis. And it was a long tedious job, a lot of work. We set the pinion angle based off just a standard HQ 1-tonner pinion angle because we have quite a few lying around the place that we checked. So we just set the pinging angle off that because we didn't have a motor and box in the car as of yet. So now that we've done this one, we've got a bit of practice for when we do our shop ute, when we finally have time, but who knows when that is. But yeah, they're just a nice strong unit. 28 spline axles. I'm pretty sure they're a 4-pinion. I may be wrong there though, but I believe they are a 4-pinion. There's heaps of options for gearing on the market, as well as spools and lockers and things, so they are just a really nice way to go. And as you can see, they are the perfect width for a 1-tonner chassis. So next up, the owner dropped over the cab. So the cab is a 47 Chevy truck cab. I don't really know a lot about it, how he came to get it, what he paid for it, or anything like that. So please don't ask me too many questions about it, guys. I'm really not sure, but I know that he had never actually seen it all put together. He bought it in pieces. He gave us a few photos that the old owner had given to him when he bought it, but it was pretty much up to us to try and piece this thing together and get it together and see how it was going to work. So with the chassis now rolling and the cab delivered, it was time to get the work on actually starting to piece this together and figuring out how we're going to get it to work. We got Darcy here to help us out for this one today. Pretty big job this one. So we got the cab on the hoist, hanging, ready to go. And then we brought this chassis around to slide underneath it and try and figure out what we're going to do. So while the boys were trying to get the cab sat on the chassis, I was actually getting the engine ready with the new CRS engine mounts. So we are running the Castlemaine Rod Shop conversion mounts for LS into HQ for this thing. It is the exact same engine mounts that we are running in the yellow shop ute, and we thought they were pretty good for the price. So we're running them on this thing. To figure out where we were going to actually situate the cab on the chassis, we really needed to get a guard on this thing so that we could sort of get a guide on where it needed to sit for the front wheel. Obviously, we really want to have the front wheels centered in the guards, otherwise it's going to look pretty ridiculous. The other thing is getting the guards on really gave us an idea for how low that part of the body actually sits, because we were in two minds about whether we really needed to cut this in to sit it down on the chassis rails properly, as the body is just a little bit too narrow in the sills to actually sit over the top of the chassis. It has to sit on top of the chassis. At start, with just the cab on the chassis, it sort of looked like it really needed to go lower, but once we started actually putting the guards on, we could see that it actually was going to look pretty good, and it was going to work out all right. The other thing, obviously, is we have to balance budget with time and work, and to actually cut those sills out and box them in and get the cab to sit down onto the chassis properly is a huge amount of work. So these things had a long step side on them from factory. The truck cab is a little bit different to the pickup cab. They are a little bit different, as well as the front guards are a little bit different as well, but the long side step actually covers the exposed chassis there, with the cab sitting up on the sills on top of the chassis. So it hides the chassis completely. It doesn't look weird at all, and it actually does sit at a pretty good height without having to do some serious panel beating to get it lower. So So once we had the guards on, we actually contacted the owner, who actually just happens to conveniently live just up the road from us, and he came down to have a look just to confirm exactly how we were going to go about it. Obviously we don't make this sort of decisions for customers, it's up to them to make the decisions, but his decision was basically the exact train of thought that we were on, in that the amount of work involved in dropping the cab right down was just not going to be worth it. It wasn't worth the time and money to do it. It was still going to work really well the way we are going to do it now, sitting the cab on top on the sills and hiding the chassis with the side steps. Should also probably add, guys, that we're not building this as a show car. It's not going to be an all-out, full-on show hot rod. What the owner wants to achieve with this thing is just a really nice cruiser that he can pretty much daily drive. That is his plan. He wants to pretty much drive this thing every day. So he's a bit of an older bloke. Having the cab up that little bit higher does help with him getting in and out of it and stuff as well. So it's sort of worked out for everyone best that way. So with the cab situated about where we want, we started getting the engine in. You can see here, this is a VE Calais 19-inch wheel that I actually have purchased for another car that we had lying around, but we thought we'd try and use it to fill the really big truck guard, just to see how it would look with some decent wheel and tire under there to fill the guard out. And it does look really good. Whatever wheels the owner does eventually want to run on this thing, they are going to have to be a pretty wild offset to fill those guards properly, but if he can get it right, this thing will look really good. So with the cab where we wanted, we just got to work on actually fitting the guards, cutting the guards in around the chassis, figuring out where we have to splice and cut and make this work to get everything on where it needs to be on. As far as the project actually goes, it was going all really well, no major issues, and looks like it's all going to fit really well and look awesome. So we had to do a fair bit of trimming of the inner guards to get them to sit where they were supposed to support the outer guards so that we could get a pretty good idea of this thing. But I must admit, watching it all come together was pretty exciting. We are super excited about this thing. We reckon it's going to be sick. The LS actually fits really nice down in the engine bay there. It's really roomy. There's plenty of room to fit a supercharger on top, but don't know that it's ever going to go that way. But it sort of looked like it was going to sit way too low when it was just the cab on there, but once you get the guards on and you start to see the actual guard level, it actually fits in there really well and nice, and it's going to work really well. So there you can see it with the bonnet on, with that VE 19-inch wheel. This thing is going to look awesome if it's stanced out correctly with the correct wheels on it with enough profile. And like I said, enough offset to really fill those guards out. But obviously not these particular wheels, but just as an example of actually having that guard filled out. So the pickup cabs actually had a lot smaller wheel well than the truck cabs. It is just something we're gonna have to work around and figure out, but that's not a big deal. So we actually had this 202 HQ radiator on the shelf that we had bought for the King Barra powered HQ, and I accidentally bought a 202 one instead of a 350 Chev one. I figured they were the same layouts, but it turned out the 202 one was actually a lot narrower. And this one being that little bit narrower, it actually fits perfectly between the inner guards of this thing. It is just the perfect size. It's really couldn't ask for much better of a fit. It's also the perfect layout. So because of all the height and room we have up at the firewall of the cab, we are going to run this thing with an expansion tank as it would have been normally in a Commodore, so we don't particularly need the filler on the radiator. So we decided if we flip it over upside down, we can actually cut the filler out of it and plate it flat and have the top tank completely seamless. And when we do this, we have a OTR in the container that came off a VY that perfectly fits over the top of the radiator. You could not ask for a better fitment of this setup. It just absolutely is meant to be, and it looks great. It's going to look awesome when it's all painted up and done. That's just with the engine cover sitting on that LS there, you can see, and you can see how that OTR actually comes down over the radiator, and just that big open grille at the front. That's the project. It's just going to feed this thing heaps of air. So there you go, guys. That's the project so far. This is what we're up to. As you can see, we're super excited about this thing. It is going to be a seriously sick car. Really cool hot rod. So far, everything's been going awesome. Everything's really just been falling into place. It's got us quite worried because it's not typically how cars go at all. So we're a bit worried about what's to come, considering how nice it's been so far, whether there might be some pretty big hiccups. But anyway, this is really only the beginning. There's still heaps far to go. The way we're working this project is we're working in stages. Those stages are based on budget. So it could be a very long ongoing project as the owner's working with budgets as stages progress. So that's why we're sort of working towards just getting the basics and what needs to be done first. But yeah, hopefully it's not super long because I don't want it to drag out. I want you to see what happens, and we really want to see this thing finished because it's going to be freaking sick. So thanks for watching as always. Plenty more to go. We'll see you on the next one. Peace out. See you. Bye.